Welcome to another informal discussion on building a more inclusive digital and analog world. We'll learn about what's on the minds of experienced practitioners in the tech for social impact space. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking with Ken Banks. Ken's an award-winning social entrepreneur, mobile technology and global development expert, and author, PopTech Fellow, Tech Awards Laureate, Ashoka Fellow, and a National Geographic Emerging Explorer. I almost had a hard time getting all of that out. There's just so much there. He currently heads up social purpose at Yoti, a digital identity company. So Ken, let's just jump right into things. I know you spend a lot of time thinking about these issues of social inclusion, equality, purpose. What's one big thing on your mind right now that you think that people need to be paying more attention to?
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's nice to be here with you. I think that a lot of the things I think about, a lot of other people are thinking about. I think the days when I had unique ideas that nobody else had have gone now. That's a thing about age. But one of the things that has been with me, I think, for quite a long time, but now feels particularly pertinent, is around local consumption, local community, how to build better communities, better local societies. So a few years ago, probably 7 years ago, I started a project called Means of Exchange, and it was the first thing I did after Frontline SMS. And it was very much focused on how we can use technology to bring us together more closely in person to the people around us. So not about using technology to make new friends on other continents or to use technology to increase our social networks around the world, but how can we use technology to better use local resources and better connect to local people? So it was a nice mix of tech and local rather than tech and international, which is the main thing.
Yeah.
And the main ethos there was, how do we encourage people to buy locally? How do we encourage people to support their neighbors, get to know their neighbors, to have lending networks, bartering networks? I mean, all these things have come and gone over the years, and some have stayed. But local currencies. How do I get people, or how do you get people to buy local honey, which is twice the price of foreign honey, but it supports the local beekeeper? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
The project drifted, but I think we're seeing a lot more attention now, going back to an awareness of local consumption, local use, local community because of the pandemic. It's making us think more about, hang on a minute, when I walk to the shop now, people are smiling and saying hello at me, and they never used to do that. People are knocking on their neighbors' doors and they're just checking that the neighbors are okay. They're lending things to their neighbors. They're doing shopping for their neighbors. People are looking out for each other, and people are buying locally because they have no other choice in many cases. So we're doing the things that I've always felt we should be doing, but it's being forced on us. And I suppose that's the one thing that's been most on my mind over the last few months.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I've been also recently, one of the things that I've been really interested in locally. In the past year, I moved to a smaller town in the U.S., and so I've been really interested in bartering and other ways of engaging, creating community. We're talking with some people about setting up a co-working space in the town. I mean, now is not the best time to be talking about co-working, but like all these ideas around how can you create that engagement at a local level and facilitate things like where there's unused capacity. So in my case, like I was bartering a skill, and I've gotten stuff that people had like furniture or other stuff that they don't need. And so you're just swapping things around without having to pay in a traditional way. But I found that while there are some tools out there that exist from a technology perspective to enable that, they're not perfect yet. And they're not really helping us to get to where we need, or at least where I would like to be. So I'm curious, I mean, have you seen examples of how technology is enabling this local community building or engagement in a really effective way?
Well, it's very fragmented, right? So generally speaking, if somebody has an idea for doing something locally, they'll build an app or launch a website, and the default place now is Facebook. I mean, we're all fighting Facebook, right? Almost everybody. I set up the local Facebook group for the village I live in because people are on Facebook. People do not want to be logging into 15 different sites to do 15 different things. That is part of the problem, I think. I mean, one of the things that really interested me, so I was looking at gamification the last of the time I was digging around means of exchange. And there was a really nice example in Brighton, on the south coast of England, of a community or a street within a community that was trying to reduce the carbon footprint of the street. There was environmentalists who were aware that people were leaving televisions on standby. They were overfilling the kettle. They were doing silly things that was basically, you know, increasing energy use, which was leading to climate change on a wider level.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get anybody really to do much. So they decided they collected data which enabled them to assess the power consumption of every house in the street. And they painted a graph down the middle of the street. And they put an average for the city and an average for the street. And the street was kind of hovering above the average. But the minute people saw that they were doing slightly worse than everybody else, they started making a determined effort to do better than everyone else.
Yeah.
So they basically gamified energy consumption, and it worked. It brought down energy levels. People started to do things because they wanted to be seen to be better. And I've always felt, and I use that example quite a lot in a lot of my talks, I've always felt that, you know, turning things into competitions, gamifying things, when we're thinking about local consumption, when we're thinking about local connections, doing things locally, is probably the way forward. But I haven't seen a lot of successful outcomes where people have tried that for whatever reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of blending sort of the digital and the analog with sort of painting it onto the street. So you maybe you're gathering the data and doing the analysis digitally, but then you're actually visualizing it for people where they actually are in a physical space, as opposed to being dependent on a digital space for them to see that. Because it probably would have been less impactful. I mean, if they posted that graph in a Facebook group versus actually painting it in the street, the impact is, and the way it hits people is going to be quite different.
Oh no, completely. I mean, it's totally in your face, right? You step out of your door to go to work, and it's just there in your face that you are, as a street, doing worse than the rest of the city, and it kind of drives you to want to be better. And you know, I did start a LET scheme, a local exchange trading scheme, on Facebook when I was running this project a few years ago, where you could find people through a Facebook app, and then you could, you know, help their child with their homework to get 10 points or 10 credits, and then you could use those credits, a bit like what you were mentioning earlier. I think that's another nice example of using the technology, but it's about finding close connections. It's not about, you know, I think the thing we're sold with social media, we're sold with social networking, is that you can connect with anybody anywhere on the planet instantly. And it's wonderfully appealing and wonderfully brilliant. But if we're spending all our time connecting with people 10,000 miles away, we're not speaking to anybody who lives within 5 miles. And that's not good for the human spirit.
Yeah, I agree completely. And it's interesting for me, about 2.5 years ago, I just gave up on Facebook entirely. I didn't delete my account because the challenge is, and I don't want to turn this into a whole Facebook discussion, but the challenge is, you know, I have so many contacts that's the only way I'm connected to them. So I kind of can't delete it, but I haven't used it in the past 2.5 years. But there's a local, there's a sort of community-based app that's called Nextdoor that exists, which is basically social media, right? So I find myself using that as one way to engage with people locally. But the challenge to what you were saying earlier is that a lot of people, like I know a lot of people in the community, they don't use that because they don't want to deal with having another app. So, you know, for them, they just use the Facebook group of that exists for the town where I live in, or there's, you know, a bunch of different community pages. And there's the fragmentation becomes the challenge. Like, how do you, and most of these are set up in a way that they don't want to allow communication with external platforms.
Right.
You know, certainly, I'm sure Facebook would never set itself up so that you could, where there was a API connecting it with Nextdoor communities, and you could link between and share, even if you're not on Facebook.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I deleted my Facebook I deleted it. I actually got rid of it, and I did the same with it. Well, Instagram, I didn't do that because with Instagram, you don't really, you can always go back, and they kind of let you let you be able to always go back. But with Facebook, I killed it. But
Yeah.
my logic was that, you can only handle a certain number of friends in life, right? There's that figure that you've only really got 5 or 10 really good friends in life. And my logic with Facebook was, if they are actually genuine, real friends, in the traditional sense of the word friends,
Yeah.
you will find ways of keeping in touch. And so Facebook makes it lazy. And so I killed it, and I lost all those connections. And sometimes I wish I still had them,
Yeah.
but maybe they weren't really that, I wasn't really that close to them, because we would have found other ways of reaching out. That's my logic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's that's sort of the bigger challenge of human connection. And you see that both on a local and a global level. I mean, I know both of us, we've done a lot of work all around the world, have lived in different places. So you have communities and people that you've been in touch with and close with at certain points in your life, and then you move, and so there's the beautiful thing about technology, you can still be connected to them. The challenging thing is that I think it still is really hard to have those genuine human connections in a way that's only digital. At least for me. I mean, maybe for people who are pure digital natives, that's something that they sort of can go back and forth between pretty easily. But yeah, I mean, I wonder, do you have any thoughts, or from your experience, as you think about locally and sort of facilitating community locally, how have you blended the two just in your own work, between facilitating community in a digital space, but also extending that into the real world and really deepening those relationships between people in the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have, maybe it's not only, I have 2 probably significant experiences with community in my life. I think the first one was with the frontline SMS community, which at the time was, incredibly inspiring, engaging, active. People were very drawn to that, and we had thousands of users daily going onto that site and posting and helping each other and doing things. And that was largely with people I didn't know, but there was a common connection. And the common connection was a piece of software that everyone was using or wanted to use in order to do things. So that was purely digital. And I did build up, what I would say were many friendships from that. The second, though, is when I moved to the village I now live in, I joined the parish council. It was the first thing I did. I used to be the captain of the pool team in the previous village, and I was the president of the cricket team. And I always kind of like to get involved and give back and support in a very physical. It's about giving yourself, not just giving your keystrokes, right? It's about giving your actual self. But I joined the village council here, helped out with a few things, and I created the Facebook group, as I mentioned earlier, for the village. And I went round with flyers. It was very much an analog stroke digital approach. I went round with printed pieces of paper, sticking them in letterboxes, telling people there was a Facebook group, trying to get that going. I mean, now I'm not on it because I've left Facebook. There's an irony there. But it's thriving. But what's interesting is it's what it reveals, in that we're a very nice village. We're very lucky where we live. But the antagonism, though, that's just bubbling under, which seems to surface online and doesn't surface face to face. Right? Dog poo on playing fields is a great one. That people will not challenge somebody if they see their dog poo on the cricket pitch, even though the dog shouldn't be there, and it's disgusting and it's bad for the kids that play cricket. But they will go on Facebook and they will post to the group and they will shout and scream and rant. And the thing, quite often the comments have to be turned off on these posts. So I think those are my experiences in a way of community. There's a purely online with the frontline SMS stuff, and then there's this being in a community with people who live around me, but then seeing the different behaviors. I think we could certainly do without the digital one, but there's no way you can do without the in-person one, because the in-person one is where it all begins.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, do you have, just on a closing sort of question or note, based on all of your experiences, what you've seen in creating digital communities, in what you're seeing in terms of digital supporting in-person real world communities, what advice would you have for people, 1 or 2 things that people can take away and just start to do in their life now to help to facilitate more local community?
Yeah, I think that it's slightly tricky. I remember reading a post a while back from someone who said, if you don't get an MBA during lockdown and don't learn to code and don't build your own website, you've wasted the opportunity, which is a really crazy way of basically, just implying that everyone's got this wonderful luxury.
Yeah,
It's not that easy. But I think that, when you can't travel so easily, I haven't been on a plane it's the longest I haven't been on a plane for a very long time. And I'm grateful for that. I never enjoy flying anywhere. I never enjoy leaving my family.
yeah,
I think even though we're not all going to be able to learn to code and do MBAs and do all that kind of stuff, there is definitely an opportunity that to walk around where you live, to become more observant about where you live, to explore it. I think to learn more about what people are doing around where you live, and to make sure that you're there to support the people who are around you where you live. And those are simply observational, getting off your backside things.
yeah,
And we all do have that opportunity, because that's just something that we're almost being forced to do now, as I said earlier. So I think for me, that really is it. And I've been doing that with my kids, try to keep life as normal as possible, but also try to realize that if that local pub shuts down, it will be gone forever. If the local beekeeper ends up having to shut up shop because of the pressures of the economy, probably gone forever. If the local vegetable stall isn't supported, whether people don't go and use it, it will shut forever. And there's always a pressure on these small local businesses. There always has been, and they're shutting down left, right, and centre.
yeah,
But right now, we could see a barren landscape of these kinds of small local traders if we don't pay attention that they're there, B, empathise with the position they're in, and C, actually use them. So that's what I say people should be doing, or should be attempting to do.
yeah. And that's those are things too where, digital can potentially support people to amplify those efforts, and, to promote local business, to share about things that are happening in the community, businesses that may be of need. Like I've seen since COVID, there have been a couple of people who have posted online about such and such business has, they're struggling right now, but they're offering whatever special, please help them out. They could really need it. They've been serving the community for X number of years. This is the sort of thing that I may not have seen in 20 years ago, because it was harder to get that message out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's, I think there's a lot that people can think about there. Although, to your earlier point, of course, there's the reality of some of that fragmentation in people. I think, what I've come to conclude is I think you just have to deal with that and navigate it until something better comes along. I don't know if you have any thoughts or perspectives on that.
Possibly not. I think the one thing that strikes in my mind, in addition to everything that we've discussed, is, this has been a great opportunity to kind of look back and to reflect on things. And sometimes reflecting is good, and sometimes reflecting is, not good.
Yeah.
But I've reconnected over the last 3 or 4 months with people who had significant roles to play in my career that I hadn't spoken to for a long time. And I've been having Skype calls and Zoom calls with them. The first one a few weeks back was a Microsoft manager who provided all the tech support I needed when I wrote frontline SMS. And he was just a random person I'd met, who's, without his help getting through technical barriers, the software would never have been completed.
Yeah.
The other was a journalist who regularly wrote about my work. Others are funders, donors, and those kinds of things. So, maybe, another thing that I've really enjoyed doing is, thinking about who's been pivotal in the last 10, 15 years of my life.
Yeah.
Who's given me a lift, who's given me an opportunity, who's helped me along, who's lifted me, and reconnect with them and just kind of rejoin and show your appreciation for what they did. I've actually really enjoyed that as a reflective process. And in a way, it's not local, but it is reconnecting the human spirit, which I think is the thing that runs through everything else that we've discussed.
Yeah, and I think, that's a great point for us to end it on, because I think that's something that I think it also help people to, as we're thinking about change that we want to see in society and the world around us, well, who are some of those pivotal people in our lives that there may be value in reconnecting with? What inspiration can we take? Because certain things are, change happens in strange ways sometimes, but certainly it's always harder for change to happen in a bubble, just sitting in isolation and lockdown. So I think, the more that we can engage with people and start to get some of those ideas flowing and thinking about these issues around community and whatnot, I think are really important. So Ken, I want to thank you a lot for joining us today and sharing these perspectives with us.
Thank you.
Of course, to anyone who's watching, please make sure if you have any thoughts or comments, reactions, share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to receive updates on future episodes. So again, Ken, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.